The San Mateo County Board of Education will come to order. As is our practice, this meeting will be recorded. The board provides remote access for members of the public and welcomes community members joining in person and remotely. The board is following the requirements of Assembly Bill AB 2449, which enables remote participation by board members only under specific circumstances. We use simultaneous interpretation in Spanish for those attending virtually through the end of public comment. Translation will continue further into the meeting if people are utilizing the channel. Thank you to our interpreters, Ana Cruz and Kimberly Larios, for joining us remotely. For meeting attendees wishing to access the Spanish translation channel on Zoom, click on the interpretation button on the menu bar. We ask all speakers to be mindful of the Spanish interpretation and speak slowly and clearly. I ask board members to speak directly into the microphone and remind speakers wearing masks to remove their masks when speaking in order to be clearly heard by all attendees. Item B is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
There is a motion to approve the agenda made by Trustee Gerard and a second by Trustee Love. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The motion passes with a vote of 5-0, and the agenda for tonight's meeting has been approved. Item 2 is public comment. Guidelines for public comment are available on the SMCOE website and in board docs, as well as on the table outside the boardroom in both English and Spanish. If there are speakers who require Spanish interpretation, our interpreters, Ms. Cruz and Ms. Larios, will interpret following each speaker's comments. At this time, members of the public may provide comment for topics not included on the approved agenda. The County Board of Education does not act upon any matter that has not been agendized except under limited circumstances as permitted by law. It is the policy of the County Board to refer matters raised in this forum to the superintendent for investigation and/or action where appropriate. Superintendent McGee, do we have any comments submitted prior to the meeting?
We do not.
Thank you. Speakers are invited to make live comment and have 3 minutes to speak. The board's executive assistant, Jennifer Perna, will keep the time and advise when the speaker has 30 seconds left. Please keep within the time limits. To make a comment over Zoom, members of the public may use the raise hand feature. Instructions for using this feature are provided as an attachment in the board packet. Once the hand is raised, please wait to be acknowledged by Superintendent McGee. Superintendent McGee, are there any members of the public attending remotely who wish to make a comment at this time?
We have one hand raised, Janice Pellizzari. Janice, I think you're good to go forward.
Okay. I was just waiting for them to let me in. Okay. Good evening, Board President Torres and Board Trustees, and Superintendent McGee. I just want to actually first start out with giving a huge thank you and shout out to President Torres and Trustee Gerard for stopping by the other day. They were out doing something else and decided to stop by Gateway and see what we were doing. And we really appreciate that. So thank you for doing that. Really, I don't have a lot to say. I'm gonna stay quiet for tonight. I just wanted you guys to know that we appreciated you for doing that. So have a good night.
Thank you. Are there any other comments?
No other comments.
Thank you. Members of the public may also provide live comment in person. Superintendent McGee, any submitted cards?
No cards.
Thank you. A public comment addressing a specific agenda item will be heard after the board's questions, comments, and discussion on the item. If members of the public wish to speak to a specific item, please use the raise hand feature when the item is announced, or if in person, submit a card in advance of the item. Item 3A is the introduction of Jennifer Mayman, Coordinator, Child Care Partnership Council, Educational Services Division. Coordinator Mayman. I think you might have to turn it on.
Okay.
How's that?
There we go.
Good evening. Good evening, Board Chair Torres, members of the board, and Superintendent McGee. I'm pleased to be with you tonight and thrilled to be joining the COE as the coordinator of the Child Care Partnership Council. My experience in early childhood ranges locations and positions. I've been a teacher in a toddler classroom and worked with municipal government, most recently in New York City, on the rollout of universal pre-K there. I'm a San Mateo County native, and when my family and I moved back to the county in 2013, I came to a CCPC meeting to learn the lay of the land, and eventually ended up prior to this at West Ed, where I supported the rollout of the quality rating and improvement system in Santa Clara County. I'm thrilled to be joining the County Office of Ed and the early childhood community in our county. It's a passionate, dedicated group, and I feel very grateful to be involved. So thank you very much.
Thank you and welcome. For item 4A, is there a motion to approve the minutes of the January 15th, 2025 regular board meeting as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
There is a motion to approve the minutes of the January 15th, 2025 regular board meeting made by trustee O'Neill and a second by trustee Gerard. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The motion passes with a vote of 5-0, and the minutes of the January 15, 2025 regular board meeting have been approved. Item 5 is the consent agenda. The consent agenda is not debatable and requires a unanimous vote for passage. An item may be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular order of business for separate discussion and action if any member of the board, the superintendent, or the public so requests. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion to approve the consent agenda made by trustee O'Neill and a second by trustee Gerard. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion passes with a vote of 5-0, and the consent agenda has been approved. For item 6A, Sarah Notch, Executive Director, Center for Access and Engagement, will provide information on updates to the SMCOE's 2024 to 2025 Local Control and Accountability Plan, or LCAP, including the 2024 to 2025 LCAP mid-year review for the Court and Community Schools program. Executive Director Notch.
How's this? There we go. Good evening, Board President Torres, members of the board, and Superintendent McGee. I'm here to bring you an update at our mid-year point for this year's LCAP. The requirement is that by the end of February, the board receives a report on two things. One is a progress on the metrics that we've been implementing on the program side, as well as a budget update. We have a slight departure this year where the budget update is going to happen at the next board meeting, still meeting that February 28th timeline, but you're receiving it in two separate meetings. So I wanted to call your attention to that because it's not how we typically do it, but circumstantially is how we're doing it this year. So I'll be going over tonight just a reminder about the LCAP components within the report. I'll review some of our goals and highlighted metrics, and then talk about what we're doing with the data that we've been able to gather so far in semester 1 of our implementation of our new 3-year LCAP. So we're at the very beginning of implementation, but we do have some data to bring you tonight. And I also included, as a reminder, some of the frameworks that we use to anchor the work that we've done in our court and community school programs, and that really guided the development of the LCAP. So we're utilizing improvement science through the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching, was certainly very well supported by the development of our school program strategic plan, using the MTSS framework with a lens on continuous improvement, as well as the CASEL framework for social emotional learning. So these are the different elements that you'll find in our LCAP when you approved it in June, and what you'll see in more of a comprehensive addition to the board packet when we do the annual update again at the end of this year. I won't read it to you, but I do want to call your attention to one thing. The comprehensive support and improvement information is only a required element of the LCAP when we are in CSI status. This year, we are not eligible for CSI status, so the report that you receive at the end of the year will not include the CSI information. But everything else you'll see there at the end of the year. So for goal 1, I included a lot of text, a lot of information. The intention is to be as comprehensive and transparent as possible. So again, I won't read all of the slides to you, but I do want to let you know how we selected which metrics to highlight. And I'm absolutely happy to take whatever specific questions you might have about them if you want me to dig deeper than the review that I give. When we were looking at which metrics to include for this presentation, we looked at 2 things. One is, what have we been able to implement so far and gather data around? There are some things that, again, in the first semester of a 3-year implementation, we haven't gotten to yet. It doesn't make sense in the progression of our implementation. There are also some metrics that require end-of-year data, like graduation rates or state testing results. The other element that we used in selecting the metrics were the areas that the board showed particular interest in when we were going through the development of the LCAP last year. So we tried to align with both of those lenses with what we're bringing you tonight. So this is goal 1. It's around the instructional support and academic achievement of students identified as English learners, students with disabilities, and at Promise Youth. This is where I'm realizing I should have brought my reading glasses. My apologies. I will do my best to get through this. The first metric is adopt and implement with fidelity curricula that supports rigorous A through G aligned instruction. Oh my goodness, thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Okay. Adopt and implement with fidelity curricula that supports rigorous A through G aligned instruction. And the way that we're going to measure that is through classroom walkthrough tools that allow us to look at fidelity of implementation as well as the instructional strategies that we're utilizing across our classrooms, and then correlate that with student outcome data. So what we've been able to do thus far is develop the walkthrough tool and prepare for the implementation of the walkthrough tool. That is going to start to be implemented this month. The other metric on this slide is regarding utilization of curriculum embedded assessments to inform our instruction, both formatively and summatively. And our goal is that 100% of students will receive those curriculum embedded assessments to inform our instruction. This has happened with fidelity in our CTE programming, but again, we haven't been able to measure it utilizing the classroom walkthrough tool yet across all of our programs. And so that fidelity of implementation data will be available at the annual update and measured starting this month. The next metric to highlight is individualizing instruction through the use of our individual learning plans and ensuring that our students have a data-driven ILP developed within the first 10 days of their enrollment in our programs. We were able to hit a 100% completion rate and shared with you in the beginning of the year how exciting it was that for the first time we actually had parents involved as part of the development of the ILPs. And that was incredibly helpful and very well received. But it did take us until October to get all of that completed. But now all of our students have ILPs, and then the process for reviewing them will be repeated. And as students come into our programs, we're still going to hit that 10-day timeline. So we'll have full year comprehensive data for you at the annual update for the percentage that we were able to meet this year. I think we learned a lot of really valuable lessons about the way that we structure that within our system that will allow us to get much closer to 100% moving forward. And then the next metric is developing and implementing a mechanism for monitoring student progress through reviewing those ILPs regularly and adjusting them as indicated by the data. We have multiple ways that this is happening right now across our different sites. There are student success meetings happening at Gateway. It's a multidisciplinary team meeting. that focuses on whole child supports for academic, behavioral, and social emotional presentations. At Hillcrest, we have our multidisciplinary team meetings, or MDTs, that happen with our partner agencies, including probation and BHRS, Behavioral Health Recovery Services. And the Canyon Oaks program has a staffing meeting between program and BHRS as well. So there are multiple different formats in which student progress and needs are captured across our 3 very different programs. We have not yet developed a mechanism for monitoring the submission of student support forms, and the PDSA cycles are getting off the ground this semester. So we'll have more information to report at the annual update. And then the final 2 that I wanted to highlight for Goal 1, the first one is around student grade point averages. And so we were aiming for 95% of students to have greater than a 2.0. And we have exceeded that in Canyon Oaks and Hillcrest and are approaching it in Gateway. And then for metric 114, increase A through G credit recovery for students who are enrolled long-term, so more than 90 days within our program. And we were excited at the opening of school report to share that we already had some pretty phenomenal credit recovery rates within our program. And our data is reflecting a significant increase from where we expected to be at this point in the year. So excited to keep that trend going. So what we've been able to measure so far informs our next step. So it allows us to look at how are we implementing the metrics and actions in the LCAP? What have we learned so far from the implementation process? And what do we plan to do with this? To one, bring you more data for the annual update, but also look at the full scope of the 3-year implementation. So for the first metric that I shared about the fidelity of implementation of our A through G curricula, I mentioned on this the slide for next steps that we are going to begin the process of those classroom walkthroughs with fidelity starting this month. And then what we are able to measure from those walkthroughs will then be used to inform the professional development that we deliver to our staff. So ensuring that that's incredibly responsive and data-driven. For the formative and summative curriculum embedded assessments, again, that fidelity or the classroom walkthrough tool for fidelity measurements will allow us to gather data on how that's working within our programs, but we're also going through a curriculum adoption process. And so that will be supported for curriculum adoption in history and social and science this year. For the ILP development, we want to ensure that what we have learned from the beginning of the year allows us to continuously hit those 100% within 10-day development rates. So ensuring that our systems are working to allow that to happen on a very timely basis for all of the students that enter our program. And then we also we're developing a more robust intake course at Hillcrest. So typically when students enter Youth Services Center, they have an orientation and intake process on the probation side, and then they come into intake on the school side. But the length of time and what is covered in that intake process has varied. So you might remember from LCAP development that our intention is to have a more structured process that allows for a more comprehensive orientation, as well as opportunities to gather data for the development of the ILPs and to inform teachers before they receive students into their classrooms of what student needs are emerging. And then finally, for 1.9, the mechanism for ongoing monitoring of student progress. We want to ensure that there's consistency in those meetings that are happening across sites, so the care team meetings, the staffing meetings, and the MDTs, and utilize that as a mechanism to drive referrals and action plans for adjustments to the ILPs, as well as change actions to monitor through our PDSA cycles. And we also recognize that we have an opportunity to leverage in our advisory period to ensure more consistent ILP monitoring. And so we'll be working with our site administration on that as well for the second semester. For GPAs, again, just making sure that in the meetings that we have already set up as a mechanism that we're talking about student achievement in a whole child approach, so addressing academic, behavioral, and social emotional. It'll allow us to be data-driven about the changes that we make to the student programming and targeted and individualized supports. And for A through G credit recovery, our academic counselor and our TOSA are regularly developing individualized plans for students based on what's indicated as a need and utilizing the ILPs to ensure that students are having or receiving access to targeted credit recovery opportunities is a focus for the semester. Goal 2 is our social emotional learning and positive behavioral support and intervention goal. So creating a supportive, inclusive, and positive school climate. The first highlighted metric is implementing a PBIS incentive system. We're utilizing 5-star right now with fidelity across school environments. Our desired outcome for this metric was that 100% of staff will award PBIS points daily. I'm sure you've recognized that we are not hitting that target. And I want to explain some learnings that we've had about the way that we're measuring it, that we are certain are impacting our fidelity and reliability of our data. 5-star allows us to pull information about dates and times that points were awarded to students. So in a perfect world, a student earns a point, they get immediate specific feedback, the point gets entered, and we could even pull a minute by minute, how are students doing in their classrooms, level of data. The reality is that our staff are working on instruction. They're not always able to enter in points right away. Sometimes support staff enter in points for them. And so when we did this data poll, we realized that we need to do one of two things, or both, to yield more reliable data for the annual update. One is potentially develop an additional way to measure the point awards so that we're not failing to capture the actual point awards that are happening, or work through strategies that our staff can use to be more timely with the point awards without impacting instruction. So we'll be exploring that with our administration. Metric 2.2 is utilizing that data in our PDSA cycles. That hasn't started yet. We anticipate it starting this month. And as I mentioned, we're going to have multiple data points in order to have valid and reliable data to use as change action in our cycles. 2.8 is pupil suspension rates. We are aiming for fewer than 5 suspensions annually. So far this year at Gateway, we've had 4 suspensions from 2 separate incidents. Canyon Oaks and Hillcrest have not had any suspensions this year. 2.5 is supporting students in skills building to lead to more pro-social choices across all school environments. We have a need to develop a system for tracking our disciplinary incidents in a way that, again, can yield valid and reliable data. So there are multiple different ways that students receive support. And it's our job over the next semester to ensure that we have consistent systems in place so that we can bring back a review of what that looks like across those different systems that we have in place. 2.6 is improving peer-to-peer interactions measured by student behavior data. That will also be developed this semester, so a way to measure and monitor that. 2.7 is building capacity of our teachers and staff in implementing social emotional learning and positive behavior intervention and supports skills building. One of the things that we are developing right now is a survey to have teachers give us input on how competent they feel in implementing those skills and lessons to help build the pro-social skills. We've been very lucky to have coordinator Greg Fry supporting at Gateway and Hillcrest primarily on the ground with really working through day-to-day real-time interactions and support and capacity building with staff, as well as presenting professional development, which he did today. So he's been a wonderful asset to our program and such a great support in getting that off the ground. And then our next steps for goal 2. So implementing the PBIS system such as 5-star with Fidelity. So in addition to the need to develop different or additional measurement tools, we also recognize the need for a reset to provide additional professional development for our staff at Gateway. And so we had the reset the first day back from winter break with our staff. So that was very helpful in reestablishing the provision of social emotional learning supports and the measurement. And then we will, again, look at the way that we're measuring that across the different systems so that we can have more data for the end of the school year. 2.2, using the PDSA cycles, that will start this month. So we'll have more to report. 2.5, the pro-social skills building. In addition to the work that we're doing within our programs, we also realize the opportunity and to work with our partners. So FLY, Pivotal Success Centers, Department of Rehabilitation. We have multiple partners who are working with our students on campus in various forums. And so the consistency across environments is going to be much higher if we have consistency in the supports that we're providing. So we're pulling our partners in for that. For 2.6, the process and protocol to gather data on the peer interactions will be defined in collaboration with our PBIS team. So that's a team of staff and administrators that will help develop that with support from our school climate coordinator, Greg Fry. 2.7, building the capacity to implement the SCL and PBIS skills building. We've had various professional development presentations so far. We did the full reset at Gateway on January 6th. The survey is coming out. So that's really, the results of the survey will inform our next steps for what's needed to bring more support to teachers in building their capacity and comfort with SEL and PBIS strategies. And then finally, pupil suspension rates. We're really pulling in families as partners as well. And so making sure that we're looking at behavior as communication and thinking through what needs the behaviors are communicating to us and being able to support them holistically through collaboration with families and partners. Goal 3 is our career technical education goal that also speaks to A through G course alignment, work experience opportunities, and expansion of community partnerships. 3.1 is about building capacity for credential certification for staff, as well as expanding enrollment in CTE courses. So in Gateway, we had 100% of students enrolled in a double block CTE course taught by 2 of our teachers who earned multiple CTE credentials, which was very exciting. And so that's something that's open to all students. All students are participating in, and because it's double blocked, they get a year's worth of credits in 1 semester. And then at Hillcrest, right now we have our master classes happening. So depending on the configurations that we're able to construct with our student populations, which sometimes are limited by interactions that they have with each other or affiliations that they might have, we're offering it to as many students as possible. And so we had 50% of our students in the summer, as well as the recent Exploring Careers culinary course in the right before winter break. For 3.4, the professional development. So we're developing that survey to capture what our teachers are wanting and asking for professional development, as well as ensuring that everybody has opportunity and access to develop a CTE credential if they're interested. So it's been something that's been offered. We had a couple of members take advantage of it, and anybody else who would like to expand their credentialing, we would be happy and excited to support them through that process. With or without their credential, we're still ensuring that they have access to professional development and support to build their CTE literacy within our programs. And then 3.5, increasing student engagement as measured by attendance rates. We need to develop mechanisms for adjusting attendance rates due to extenuating circumstances. This primarily applies to Canyon Oaks if students are hospitalized for long periods of time or if they leave the facility for periods of time before returning. So we're working with our data team around that. And then chronic absenteeism, our hope is that fewer than 15% of students will be chronically absent. Overall, we have 37 or 35.7% of students ranging from 0% to 86%. So that's really showing us that we have some work to do at Gateway, and we'll be focusing attentions there. Next steps for goal 3. We want to continue to have high rates of participation for students receiving CTE courses, both at Gateway and Hillcrest, expanding into Canyon Oaks, supported by a grant, receiving a grant that will allow us to move into that program as well. And the grant also includes a partnership with the Community College District. So we're excited about what's to come there. For 3.4, the professional development. So leveraging partners, collaborative education advisors, Skyline Community College, Project Change will really allow that multidisciplinary perspective for our teams to improve and increase their CTE literacy. 3.5, attendance rates for students, continuing to work with families and students and look through the lens of what their needs are so that we can provide targeted and individualized supports to help improve their attendance rates. And then chronic absenteeism, we'll be continuing with all of the different support team meetings that we have across our sites. They're very powerful support team meetings as you see that they show up in multiple metrics, and that's intentional because we don't want to have different systems for each individual metric. So it's great that we can leverage so many things. And then finally, goal 4, our mid-year progress. This is around support to students identified as foster youth within SMCOE school programs and across San Mateo County. So the metrics that you'll see in our goal 4 actions will say one of 3 things. It will say across San Mateo County, which is the outward facing work that's being done by the Safe and Supportive Schools team to districts and charter schools. It will say across San Mateo County and within SMCOE school programs, so for both, or it will say within SMCOE school programs, and that's just program facing. So you'll see that throughout the different metrics. The first one is both, so within SMCOE school programs and across the county, looking at credit recovery rate. For the work that's done across the county, and this is pretty consistent throughout most of the metrics at this point in the year, Dr. Ben Gonzalez, the Executive Director of Safe and Supportive Schools, who leads the Foster Youth Liaison team, they need to do data requests and record requests from the districts in order to be able to measure this. And those records aren't available until the end of the semester. So at this point in time, they are working on receiving and analyzing all of that data. And then we are also developing our baseline data within our school programs since we recently completed a semester, and we'll have that update at the annual report. 4.6, again, both school programs and San Mateo County, reducing absenteeism by 20%. So we need to develop a baseline for that, and that's exactly what's being worked on right now. 4.7 is, again, both SMCOE school programs and across San Mateo County, ensuring that when child welfare agencies request records to aid in the delivery of services to students, that we are 100% compliant and have swift responses so that our mechanisms don't hold up the process of students getting supports and services they need. We are at 100% already, which is great. So we want to make sure we keep that up. And then 4.9 is just within SMCOE school programs, ensuring that we have educator participation in all of our professional development. So far, we have 100% participation rate for that as well. If a staff member is out for the full day, we do not count that as an absence from professional development because they weren't on site, but we make sure that they get the content at another time. Our next steps for goal 4, developing baseline data for the credit recovery rates within our school programs as well as across the county. Within our school programs, that's supported by our academic counselor and our TOSA, as well as those student support meetings across the 3 sites, CARE, MDT, and the staffings at Canyon Oaks. 4.6, within SMCOE school programs and across the county, reducing absenteeism. That's another, we need to gather baseline data. So we're right at the beginning of being able to do that from a semester perspective. So we'll have more for you at the annual update. 4.7 is within SMCOE school programs and San Mateo County, continuing that interagency partnership and response rate. So we are at 100% right now. Things are running really smoothly, but on our radar, if that falters at any point, we have talked about developing checklists, if appropriate, to ensure that it's very easy for staff to provide all of the required documents to our agency partners. And then finally, educator professional development. We want to ensure that there's still engagement and participation in professional development. And in order for it to be meaningful and effective, we want to make sure that what we are asking of our teachers to do in their classrooms, we are doing ourselves with adult learning theory and engagement strategies from CASEL's core signature SEL practices. So that is the status for all 4 goals. And happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Trustee Love?
Thank you. Oh, me or here?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That was a wonderful report. Thank you so much. Just a couple observations and then questions just for my own edification. Feels like really good progress. Clear and relevant metrics. Found that and honest. I feel like there's been a lot of progress in all the years I've been hearing this. So I really appreciate that. That's wonderful. And just doing really important work with students in our programs as well as students in foster care across the county. So that's really great to hear. I had a question about GPAs. I feel like that is an issue that has kind of troubled me over the years when I've seen these reports. And it seems like there's progress on that. And we're not there at Gateway. Any thoughts on trajectory on that or what we're doing? Because I feel like that's the thing that we give them as the gift, one of the things to move on.
Yes. Yes, and they're often entering our programs at a deficit as well, right, for GPA and credit accrual. And so through the use of the ILPs and the different support meetings that we have, and again, looking through that whole child lens of academic, behavioral, and social emotional, our goal is with those mechanisms in place that we're looking to identify and mitigate any barriers that we might be able to pinpoint that are impacting their ability to access their educational programming. And looking from an individualized lens at each student and adjusting the ILPs for each student will allow us to provide those targeted supports. So that's on a student-by-student basis. Additionally, the PDSA cycles or Plan, Do, Study, Act for Improvement Science will allow us to look at more global data across our program. So we'll be able to use the lens of what's happening student by student, and then what are we seeing as trends within our program to both inform supports and professional development for our staff to hopefully improve student outcomes.
Thank you. Just had a question about the curriculum embedded assessments to inform instruction intervention. I just didn't make the connection between how that related to the collaboration with the curriculum instruction team here.
Oh,
Like that, when I was reading through it, I couldn't make the link.
yes. So right now we have adopted curriculum in all of the subject areas, but our social science and science curriculum are being updated this year through a pilot and adoption, which we'll be bringing to the board. So there will be new assessments as part of those adoptions. So part of the process of that pilot. And the recommendation for adoption is looking at the assessments that are embedded within the curricula to ensure that they're giving us data at a sensitive enough rate so that we're able to in real time adjust our instruction rather than waiting for sort of latent data that tells us what happened in the past but doesn't allow for that real time assessment. So the connection is that we have things in place now and we're going to have things that are new as part of this pilot process. So making sure that we attend to that in the adoption process and really look and carefully study the data we're getting out of those embedded assessments when we're implementing in the pilot.
Thank you. I think
Mhm.
that's just attendance is a tough nut, so
Yeah.
appreciate all the work that you're doing on that.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you, sir. And I just had a couple questions. One, under LCAP Goal 3, you have improved student attendance rates by an average of 25%, not including absent without leave. And why would you not include absent without leave? I mean, wouldn't someone, they just didn't feel like coming to school that day?
That primarily is at Canyon Oaks, our residential facility. So it is, I don't want to say it's not uncommon because it is uncommon. It doesn't happen to most students, but when we look over the years of student data, we do see that we have a high enough percentage of students who will leave. It's not a locked facility. So California doesn't have any locked facilities. So the students have free access to leave. And sometimes that happens. And then it takes a while for us to be able to get them back in the program for a variety of reasons. So because the population is so small, if we pull that into our overall data, it really skews the results kind of on a global school programs wide scale. So we want to make sure that while we are of course attending to the students who are AWOLing or who are hospitalized for long periods of time from an individual lens, it's not as helpful for us to have that factored into our kind of global numbers in a way that would inform interventions that we would be utilizing. So just like we want to make sure that the assessment tools we're using are sensitive enough instruments, we want to make sure that the data we're collecting is sensitive enough as well.
So basically, it's because the pool is so small
Exactly.
there. And another comment, and this is not picking on you at all, but in all the years I've had in government and stuff, everybody develops their own language, whether it's a city or a school district. And a lot of these are an educationese, okay? I mean, it's like local LCAP Goal 2 says, this process will be developed through the collaboration of our PBSI team and SMCOE, and then there's MTSS. And is there any way to put some sort of glossary on here so the average person that's reading this could look it up and say, what is MTSS? Because I know, no, I'm new to the board. I was on a board 12 years ago, and I have catching up with acronyms, okay? But for transparency purposes, an average citizen's looking like this, like you had PBIS in here, and I was wondering, what is PBIS? But it finally was defined further into it. So all the
Yes.
times it was PBIS before, I was wondering, what is that? And then there was another one. So
No, that's good feedback. And I will be more mindful of that in these update presentations. In our LCAP document itself, whenever it's the first reference, and sometimes multiple times throughout, if it's been a while since we referred to the acronym, we do spell it all the way out and then
Right.
put the acronym in parentheses, but it's not as obvious in this format. So thank you for that feedback.
well, and that's just like a general comment for
No, of
all of
course,
these
that's important.
boards.
It is, yeah, it's important for accessibility.
I mean, if you want transparency, you got to make it so
Absolutely.
people can read it. No, and I'm not picking on you at all.
Oh, no,
okay?
I appreciate the
It's
feedback. Thank you.
endemic in this industry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Trustee Bonini?
Thank you for the report. I have a few questions. My first one is on page 10, and it's regarding 1.6 and just in general, that first goal. My question is, I see the goal incorporating walkthroughs and, giving feedback. to teachers. So my question is, are you asking teachers to gather information, for instance, on focus students that they have or any other data that they can identify within the classroom setting, or a goal specifically that they could set for students? Are you, I guess I'm asking, are you including the teachers in that process? And then are you kind of relying on them because they're seeing the students every day? And so that's my question, my first one.
Yes, absolutely. So the walkthrough tools are non-evaluative. It's a way for us to look at what is happening in the classroom with instruction to inform the supports that we're giving to staff. And the result of that will be a collaborative conversation where, yes, absolutely, we will ask for their perspectives, their contexts, things that we might not have been able to observe in our measurements. We also have our advisory period where they are reviewing the ILPs and looking at each student's credit accrual, credit recovery, absence, all of those things that we're measuring, and providing support, providing input through the care meetings. We have MDTs and the staffings at Canyon Oaks. So there's lots of different mechanisms for two-way communication and feedback so that we can ensure that we're meeting global needs of students and staff.
Thank you. My second question is on page 12, just in your reference to the care meetings and the staff meetings at MDTs. How are those structured, like within the school day? I mean, you know, that the teachers are busy most of the day. So is that something that happens with the teachers like after school, or they have release time? How do you manage that with our teachers?
So the staffing at Canyon Oaks happens in the afternoons. The students have their academic program in the morning, and then our staff are able to participate in those meetings in the afternoons when they're not providing instruction. The care meetings are new at Gateway, so they've had one so far, and I believe it was done on a Wednesday. I could be wrong about that, but I believe it was a Wednesday on our early releases. If that's not possible for a variety of reasons, we can also provide coverage and release time to make sure that we're able to get participants involved. The MDT meetings right now are just administrators and partner agencies. And so the work that the administrative team does with the staff is there's a morning meeting. This happens at Gateway as well, every single morning. So before they start instruction, there's a time for two-way feedback and communication about real-time things that are happening at the site and or any concerns that need to be brought up. So there's lots of different ways that that's happening.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
My next question is about the PBIS. It's slide 14. That's where I marked my question. And I always see this with PBIS. It's like a focus on, yes, you want to have data. You want to be able to see if it's working. And what I'm not sure I noticed here was sort of what is the student outcome? I'm assuming like I could read into it and say better outcomes for behavior. But I don't feel like I don't see that measurement. So I'm curious like how if that's embedded somewhere else, or if that's just intended, if it's just happening because of this. And then I also just want to make a note, being a teacher right now who's implementing elements of PBIS and entering points. It's super hard to do it in the
Indeed.
school day. And I don't know, I mean, perhaps the data that you get from minute to minute, hour to hour might be useful. But for me, I feel like it's an overall, like my assessment of it personally is that it's an overall sort of, are they getting points?
Mhm.
And so the exact time they're getting the points, I think it's a little bit unrealistic. That's just my opinion.
Oh, yeah.
And I guess, training is possible and time, but it just seems like a challenge. So I just wanted to share that.
I completely
perspective.
agree. It's definitely a pie in the sky. It would be great if it happened, but we don't ever want to put a support in place that then is at the expense of something else, like instruction, or, it all has to fit together.
Right.
So the first part of your question, what we'll see as a result of the PBIS and social emotional learning implementation will be measured across the LCAP in multiple categories. So we'll look at suspension rates. We'll look at the students' development of pro-social skills, measuring their their perspective on what school is like for them through surveys about, how do they feel like they have at least one trusted adult on campus? Do they feel a sense of belonging? I don't know if I said absence rates already. I think I started with that. So there's lots of different ways that will show up. We don't repeat those metrics within the LCAP in multiple places because it's measuring, and ideally everything's fitting together and playing into kind of a comprehensive plan. But we'll also look at things that are harder to measure, in data polls or from the dashboard. Like, do students feel like they belong? Do they feel like school is a welcoming place? What are we hearing from them about that? We could look at redemption rates for the PBIS program when they're earning points. What are they doing? What's encouraging to them and helping keep that behavioral momentum going? So it'll happen in a variety of different ways. But definitely agree with you that what we're aiming for is not in the minute, in the moment, when you've given that specific verbal praise so that students know, hey, I saw that. That was good stuff. I love that. Keep doing that. So they're able to kind of internalize that. We don't then expect the staff to run over to their computer and enter in a point. So we'll be developing other ways to measure that implementation more reliably so that we can capture it in a variety of different ways.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I have two more. One is the next one has to do with suspensions at Gateway. I guess this is more directed to Superintendent McGee. I don't know that we as a board have heard about any suspensions at all. And I don't know that we would hear about that in terms of details, but I would expect if I'm seeing this on the data that I would know that there were suspensions. So I'm just sharing my perspective on that. I don't know, there's probably off, you can share their information later perhaps, but I just wanted to express my concern with that. And lastly, sorry, I'm curious on the chronic absentee rate for Gateway, that's super high. Is it that students are not at school, or is it that students are not in their designated classroom space and they're being marked absent
It's if they are not at school.
completely?
So if they are, let's say a student is on campus but is accessing support in our wellness center, they're present on campus, they're getting their needs met, they're there. So it's really about, are they in school or are they not in school?
Thank you
Mhm.
for answering all my questions.
Of course.
Trustee Gerard?
Yes, I actually have a question on the absentee ism because if the student's not there, we can't help them. End of story. When we visited Gateway Campus last October, they had implemented a program where if a student didn't come to school, they actually called the student's home or wherever the student was and said, we're coming to get you, so get dressed.
Mhm.
And they went and got the student and brought them to school. And the day we were there happened to be a student there that they had gone and got. I guess that's probably not proper English, but whatever. They went and brought him back to school. And he said flat out, he said, I was just being lazy and I just didn't want to come. But I appreciate somebody cared enough for me that they would call and that they would come and get me and make me come to school. Is that program still being implemented?
The outreach to families, yes. I'm honestly not certain if they are. We do have county cars that we could utilize to go help support students. That may have happened a couple of times so far this year. But really looking at what the barriers are and working with our districts about transportation as well. There's, we've already done one adjustment, slight adjustment in the scheduling. Doesn't impact instructional minutes or anything. They're still getting the full amount of time, but we changed slightly the start times and break times to respond to patterns that we saw about student attendance. And so if we continue utilizing our processes to look at what's happening on an individual basis as well as kind of globally across the school site, our intention is to identify more supports, maybe that exact support or additional ones that would be able to help ensure that our students are making it to school. But I think you really hit on something very important, which is students need to know that people care. And so that's why we're working a lot with belonging and feeling supported through the work in the SEL arena. So our working theory is if students are engaged in the curriculum, they feel a sense of belonging, if they think that it matters to someone that they're there, if they've made positive relationships, they're more likely to come. And many of our students are referred to us because of attendance issues. So the other thing that we're looking at is, have we had a positive change across time, looking at what were their attendance rates in the district? And even if we're not hitting our target, are we getting closer so that we can measure the effectiveness of our interventions to help make more progress toward that overall goal?
Well, I know that the students said that they felt like somebody really cared. If they went to
great.
enough trouble to call and say, why aren't you here? And if you're not here, we're coming to get you to bring you here, that they really cared. And I think that's what a lot of these kids need to know, is that somebody cares. So.
It's great. Thank you. I appreciate that feedback.
Thank you. I have two questions, one about the chronic absenteeism as well. It's also counted towards them if they're tardy, correct? Or no?
I actually don't know.
I can't remember because
I mean, can I phone a friend?
What was the question?
Do tardies count in our chronic absenteeism rates? My understanding is that it's just full absences, but tardies aren't captured in that, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Correct?
I always like to check my math.
Yes.
Sure. I want to bring you up-to-date information.
Right. Thank you. And then the other question was for the walkthrough tools. Could you talk a little bit more about what that looks like? Is that a rubric? Is that like, does the rubric include, I know you mentioned instruction, but does that also include like student engagement and
Yes.
other pieces?
Yes, and so there's looking at high leverage practices for all students, but also particularly focusing on students who are identified as English learners, students with disabilities. So research-based and measuring not only what are we seeing as instructional strategies, but also directly looking at engagement, measuring engagement, even to the point of asking students, if it's not too disruptive, hey, what are you doing right now? What's the outcome for this lesson? How do you feel about it? How is it working for you? So it is kind of global across what we can see and observe of the teachers and of the students.
Great. Those were all my other questions were asked by fellow board members. Are there any other questions or comments? Any from the public?
No hands.
Thank you. There is no action to take on this item. Thank you.
Thank
For
Thank you.
item 7A, Dr. Zoni Boyer, Coordinator, Center for Access and Engagement, and Sarah Notch, Executive Director, Center for Access and Engagement, will provide a presentation on the alternative diploma pathway. The floor is yours.
Good evening. We are so excited to be here. This is a particular passion of both of ours. And so tonight we're going to bring you a report on how we within SMCOE school programs across districts and statewide have been able to work through unlocking the potential for students with cognitive and developmental disabilities through the alternative diploma pathway. Sorry. I'm going to introduce Dr. Zoni Boyer. She's going to kick us off, and then we'll just trade back and forth.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I don't know if everyone or if anyone is familiar with Judy Heumann. She is known as like the mother of disability, and she is single-handedly responsible for integrating New York public schools back in the day. And so I like to think that this the alternative diploma pathway work is very much grounded in what she said was disability is not a barrier, it is a perspective. So with that being said, a little bit of background of like where it came from. Oftentimes, as educators, we think legislation just comes out of the blue, but this has been in the making for quite some time, really going back to about 10 or so years ago, looking at accountability and just graduation rates and really focusing on those outcomes for students with disabilities, right? And so if you're looking at, are they being prepared for career, college, education, independent living? What are the areas that need to be looked at? And so what came out of that was the CIE blueprint, the competitive integrated employment blueprint, which was developed over the course of a number of different agencies, including the Department of Developmental Services, Department of Rehab, CDE, and really looking at what are the skills and what is necessary for students with disabilities to become more successful once they leave us. And then so that CIE blueprint was a pivotal document in the development of the there was July 21, the Alt Pathway Work Group. They used that document quite a bit as far as guidance in determining that an alternative diploma pathway really needs to be developed for one student group within the disability community. So essentially, students with cognitive and developmental disabilities. So students who are eligible for taking the CAA, the alternative assessment, and not for students who could earn their diploma through like inclusive access to more inclusive ways of accessing their education environment. So like students with mild, moderate disabilities, this isn't for them. And they really wanted to make that determination because of how much the modified curriculum was. So then the bill was signed into law June 2022 by Governor Newsom. And then the LEAs had to implement by June 2024. And this was open for students who entered ninth grade or later their school year 22-23. And so I wanted to call attention to what a job, and this is from the Bloomberg report, what jobs with students, or not students, with individuals without diplomas are qualified to do. And so in that area, that circled area, what we're seeing is a lot of automation now. So if you're thinking about like self-checkouts, like at grocery stores, you're thinking about like Costco now even doesn't necessarily have a person at the front. You could just scan your card. And so a lot of those jobs are for students without, not students, individuals without diplomas. And so our population automatically are placed into that category because we don't offer that for them. They were earning certificates of completion. So we were really doing a disservice to that entire population because you're really limiting how much they can access as adults, including independent living. You're talking about access to employment that offers health benefits and things like that. So now we're talking about what's going on at the state level.
Thank you. So I mentioned that this was a passion of ours, and I feel so fortunate that I'm able to participate in two statewide organizations. One is through the California County Superintendent's subcommittee called SECO, so Special Education Administrators of County Offices. So that's where my counterparts across the state gather together every other month and share incredible resources and ask lots of questions, sometimes really tough ones, to partners who come to our meetings. And then I'm also a commissioner on the Advisory Commission for Special Education, which is a CDE commission that advises multiple different entities, including the governor, the state board, legislature, CDE, a special education division. So if you think back to that timeline that Dr. Boyer showed, there's a lot that's been happening leading up to the passage of AB 181 and the ultimate implementation at the LEA level. And so the participation in these statewide organizations has allowed us to sometimes get really specific with our partners in between the guidance that gets pushed out statewide. For SECO in particular, right now I'm the chair this year, and so we've been able to provide leadership and guidance to multiple partners who attend our meetings regularly. So through California County Superintendents, we have the Senior Director of Governmental Relations and Legal Affairs. We've been able to bounce lots of ideas off of him, as well as provide input that resulted in the change in statute language, which is really rewarding to see that the boots on the ground perspective of administrators who are running programs primarily, but not exclusively, for students with extensive support needs was really considered and heard, and then actioned in the statute language. So that was very exciting for us. We also have the CDE Special Education Division participate in all of our meetings, and the State Board Education Policy Director. So we're able to work through and across multiple agencies to ask the tough questions, sometimes the ones they don't want us to ask, but we ask anyway because we really want to make sure that we are providing the best support in development of these programs. And I would be remiss if I didn't also include the SELPA Administrators Association. So the partnership with the SELPA Administrators Association with sharing information about all of the incredible guidance that the SELPAs are offering to LEAs, as well as presentations from some of the SELPA administrators who are doing this work in a really deep level was also very informative and helpful. I've been able to give presentations about the work that we've done, which we'll dig into a little bit more with you, to my counterparts across the COEs, which has helped in turn inform what they're doing in their own programs. And this is particularly important to us because one of the big concerns that was raised when the legislation was enacted without a lot of guidance or runway time, really, even though, as Dr. Boyer pointed out, it wasn't a new conversation, but it seemed to happen pretty suddenly for a lot of people who are running programs. And our fear was if there's not clear and consistent guidance, it's going to result in inconsistencies and inequities in access across the state. And so joining together as a SECO body, as well as partnering with our SELPA Administrators Association, really allowed us to stay current with what's happening and ensure more consistency across the state. And then at the Advisory Commission for Special Education, or ACSE, I am a state board appointee. So in addition to the meetings that we have every other month for ACSE, I have regular liaison interface with the state board policy director. And so we're able to, again, ask a lot of questions, share information, share our perspectives. And this was particularly helpful when the language initially came out about, there were questions around the particulars in the requirements. For example, is the state board going to adopt alternate curriculum? The answer is no. And it was great to be able to get that answer quickly and in real time so that we didn't feel like we had to wait for something to happen at the state level before we began implementation. Also, a lot of advocacy with the CDE Special Education Division. And I mentioned already, we were able to, through that at SECO and at ACSE, shape some of the statute language revisions. And then having access to that, to those kind of partners statewide was really invaluable for me to be able to come back and think about our programs and the support that we can help provide across the county, because the FAQ guidance gets pushed out every so often. And sometimes, even with the best of intentions, feels like a restating of the statute language and doesn't feel super helpful. Or it doesn't provide new information. And so being able to ask the in-between the lines questions was really wonderful. So with all of that, we were able to start focusing on what are we doing within our special services program. And I know for some of you, this is not going to be new because we were able to bring you some information at our opening of school presentations for what's happening over in special services. But for the good of the group, I'll quickly touch on kind of the 3 phases of what we did in response to the passage of AB 181 in our programs. So we'd been using Unique, which is a supplemental material for students on an alternate curriculum. And we weren't certain that that was the right match. And so we really wanted to do kind of an apples to apples comparison with the other leading supplemental material publisher, Teachtown. And so we had a year-long, led tremendously by Dr. Boyer, very rigorous and robust pilot where we did side-by-side implementation of Unique and Teachtown with PLCs who were meeting regularly. Dr. Boyer led the Teachtown PLC, and Ellen Paulino, our principal, led the Unique PLC. And we also wanted to make sure that our teachers and staff had comparable training. So even though we'd been implementing Unique for a long time, we brought the publishers in to do the same level of training that the Teachtown group was receiving, and really involved our staff in what's important to them, what do they think is effective, what do they think is missing, what are they hoping to see. So looking at not only access points for students, but also for ease of fidelity of implementation for our staff. Based on the outcome data in that, again, very rigorous and robust pilot phase, we were able to determine that our students experienced greater success when we were utilizing the Teachtown materials than the unique materials. So we switched and then started on a journey to provide pretty rigorous and robust implementation support. So again, lots of training, in-class coaching. The teachers who had been implementing unique got the training again, all over again, that the Teachtown group received, and the Teachtown group went through again as well. So really making sure that we had that support for our staff for implementation. And it's been a really phenomenal and kind of game changer by all reports from our staff of what they're able to see and measure and have our students engage in. So to dig a little bit deeper, I will turn it back over to Dr. Boyer.
So to start developing the course of study, looking at modified standards, we really were looking at the essential standards and like the core connections, right? And so there are guidance documents and things like that that exist. And so utilizing that, really mapping across what Teachtown learning objectives were, and then how they align with the essential standards and core connections for the for Common Core standards. And so what I did was kind of broke everything down to where units were blocked out across 4 years. So grade 9, grade 10, and grade 11, and grade 12. And those units placed them and like went through all of them to ensure that all of the objectives were hitting the exact essential standards and core connectors to ensure that students were getting that level of support and rigor in the instruction. So not making sure that like nothing is skipped and things like that. And because they are modified standards and they're the core connectors, they are broken down between 9th and 10th. And so developing that, it was really breaking down what units are we going to focus on for grade 9 and which ones are going to focus on grade 10. And there are there's subtleties in how they change between the grade levels, right? And so like certain things will change based on like where you are in the standard. So that was the first step. And then in this part of the process, really the IT team was very, very instrumental in this process. So definitely want to thank like Clarissa Tom, Jade Takahashi, and Mervin Raddick in this portion, because it really was about finding the different course codes and course descriptions, because they are the ones that have to put everything into Aries, right? So that this is how students' transcripts are developed. And so had to start with the mapping first in order to see what the course would be. And so that was developed based on, so if let's say units 64 through 68 in English language arts really hit the classics of like poetry and literature and plays, then that course description would be like the classics, grade 9 or something like that, because it hits so many different areas. And so they were really helpful in helping me determine which course codes to use, and also like refining credits and things like that, and like learning how that works. And so then we needed to develop a grading rubric, and Mrs. Paulino was so helpful in collaborating with me on like what this should look like, and not based on typical like standard sort of like grading, but really based on engagement and participation, and like how much of it like it's happening. Because oftentimes within this population, doing things like coming into the classroom and getting your materials and sitting down to do one thing really is like 5 steps to complete one task. And so they should get credit for all of those things. And so the rubric really reads based on that. And so in past guidance, a lot of the guidance early on was really based in, it's probably easier just to pass fail. The state did not say whether school districts can go one way or another. We felt very strongly that it should be based on either a 5-point scale, which would mimic A, B, C, D, and not passing. And then that way students, because they are not our students, if districts are building up more robust continuums, this curriculum in our grading system could easily fit into there. So even if they decide on pass, fail, passing is still, like a D. So they would know that if a student got a 2, they passed that course. So even if they haven't developed in that way, R still fits. If they developed in the way that's traditional in A, B, C, D, or fail, the rubric still fits. So it was very easy to, it wasn't easy to develop this, but we made it, we wanted to make it easy for, in case the students were going back to their districts. So moving forward and supporting districts. And I do want to again shout out Ellen Paulino and all of the ed specialists and paraeducators and facilities and all of those people, because it really is a much bigger team than just the teaching part of it. And this is very important because like now that we're moving into supporting Jefferson Union and other school districts, Jefferson Union actually went and observed Ellen's programs back in December. So sharing and supporting and working with Jefferson Union started about 22, 23. There was just the sharing of the resources of like this, you know, we have the essential standards, we have the connectors and things like that. And what was a little bit difficult was like the history and social science, because as we know, there are no essential standards or connectors for those because the state doesn't test in that area. So really figuring out what hits in each grade level. So sharing those resources to so that they don't have to recreate the wheel in that sense. So 23, 24 shared the course of study that was developed so that they could see like what ours looks like so that they can develop it for themselves, which of course will look very different because their students have access to general education classrooms and are included. And so what theirs can look like will be much more, would be supplemented through Teach Down, which they are also using that curriculum. And so it could, their course of study could be, would look different. Like ours would be one, but they might have like 3 or 4 different courses of study based on they have SDCs, they have fully included, they have, you know, maybe students whose LRE is just like 70% of the day instead of 80, like things like that. And then moving into this year, we really started doing like in-person meetings with SPED directors and school site teams. And it was through this that we really learned the importance of the site principals being involved because they developed the master schedule. And so we kind of didn't think of it in that way. It was just kind of, we were thinking like, oh, just develop the course of study. But like, no, we really need those site principals and like those SPED teams involved so that they know which classrooms are going to be easier for students to be included in. So moving forward, because after working with Jefferson Union, meeting with them and their school teams twice now, what came out of that was this idea of a think tank so that everyone across the county and across like just Region 4, so whether it's like Alameda County people or Monterey County and things like that, where we can all come together and see where we can all help each other in developing courses of study, especially for the LEAs. It's really difficult for people to kind of make things like just on their own, like by themselves, and like without any, like not being able to collaborate. This is a very difficult and huge task. So the think tank is really about involving multiple partners across the county to come and like have these conversations together. Like one of the things that came out of that came out of the Jefferson meetings was one of the reasons why it's important to have grades maybe instead of pass fail is because then students would be eligible for financial aid. And without that, they can't. And so there are quite a few secondary programs like SEEDS and UC Davis and Wayfair and Fresno State and things like that. And like all those SEEDS is fully funded through a regional center and the state and those types of things. Fresno State takes financial aid, but if they couldn't apply for it, then if their family or themselves weren't able to make up the cost, then that's an unnecessary barrier. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Trustee Lepp?
Thank you for that presentation. I learned a lot. I appreciate it. I just had a question. Maybe I missed something. So the county office has been doing this work for a long time and is seen as a leader in it in the state and in the county, correct?
We're definitely leaders within our SECO group, the Special Education Administrators of County Offices. I think the work that the SELPA Administrators Association has been doing across the state is reaching a wider audience of LEAs, and they've been invaluable partners. But within our counterparts across the state that are running very similar programs to ours, yes, we've been able to help provide lots of guidance and supports to other county offices who are maybe in different places in their implementation of the ALT pathway.
And then are we seeing improved, like more diplomas being given, like the graphic that Dr. Boyer shared of like the folks down at the bottom? Like, is that changing? Have we been changing that already? Or
We
are we
specifically
waiting?
within programs or across the state?
Well, I'm kind of looking just at our programs.
Mhm.
Like, we didn't need AB 181 to come along to make us do this, right? We were already kind of moving in this direction.
Well, prior to AB 181, students who participate in the California Alternate Assessment, which is about 1% or should be around 1% of the students in the state, are not eligible to earn a diploma. So they would earn certificates of completion. This opened up a pathway to allow them to either work toward a certificate of completion or a diploma. And because of the timeline of when it was enacted and the ages of the students who were eligible, we haven't been able to progress all the way through a graduating class yet. So we anticipate that if IEP teams elect to participate in the ALT pathway, that yes, we will definitely see a vast increase from 0% of students earning a diploma. But we hope as we continue to implement our program that even change over time, we'll see more and more families and IEP teams electing this as an option and success with our student population. But we just haven't had enough time for implementation yet to get to a point where we could measure that.
Okay, I just missed something along the way. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Of course.
Trustee Benini?
Thank you so much for this presentation. Super exciting. I'm just curious, you just said in your last comment around if the IEP teams elect to do this and that sort of education piece, how are parents getting information about this? Is it just through those teams, or is there some other resource that they have, or other agencies like, I don't know, other like the CACs or other elements of SELPA, are they tied into this and sharing that out to parents?
I would be shocked if they weren't, based on what we've heard from the SELPA Administrators Association, the Family Empowerment Centers, what regional centers are doing, different agencies across the state who help support with transition services. So it's something that's definitely out there in lots of different ways. For us, it's really about providing kind of psychoeducation to a certain extent about, the points that Dr. Boyer brought up about what could this do? What barriers could this remove? What opportunities could this open? What does it look like? How is it different than a certificate of completion? And then, yes, every family ultimately gets to decide through the consent process, unless the student's 18 and not conserved, but most of our students are, if they want to elect that pathway. But for us, whether they elect the pathway or not, the rigor of instruction for students on an alternate curriculum has increased exponentially. And what our teachers are reporting and our staff's reporting to us about the mastery that students are able to show, the responses that they're able to get, it's improving student outcomes regardless of whether or not they opt into the pathway. So for all students, we're engaging in instruction that will open that and keep that option on the table. But there's still benefits for students even if they don't elect that pathway, if they elect to stay on a certificate. Yes, of course.
I just wanted to add to that, also early on with a lot of the guidance, it was like sample letters and things like that were provided. And so like I've shared a lot of that with the people that I have talked to, like whether it's Jefferson Union and things like that. And then also like having that conversation and letting them know that you guys need to be talking to parents now and holding either parent nights or parent groups, utilizing your CACs and things like that, which it came up in the last CAC meeting. And so really making sure that parents are aware that this is an option and like what it is and what it isn't, right? And so oftentimes one of the things that really kept coming up was, why can't students with mild, moderate disabilities earn it, and they're struggling with? And so it's really, and that was one of the fears. And that's why I've definitely pushed the message, like, you guys have got to talk to parents, because if parents for students with any disability who has an IEP thinks that this is open to them, that's going to kind of open up a can of worms for a lot of districts. And so really being transparent in who this is for and doing it early and often. So
Thank you for that. I just wanted to add, I don't sit on the Commission on Disabilities anymore, but there are a lot of opportunities through that. We used to do a lot of partnerships, presentations, also the Transition to Independence Fair, which we've hosted here and we've done in many other venues through the special education coordinators, or I don't forget their titles right now, for each district. So I don't know if that's happening this year because I wasn't able to stay on and help chair it anymore. But anyway, I just putting that out there because it's really, like you said, it's really important. It's such a black box for parents when they're trying to navigate all of the things around the IEP, and this is such amazing information for those students who might have that opportunity. So thank you.
And Trustee Gerard?
Yes. I have a question about what the diploma will be called. Because we would say a high school diploma or whatever it might be, and you're talking about an alternative pathway. Would it be referred to as an alternative diploma, or would it be just a diploma, or how would someone present that to an employer, I guess is a better question.
That's an excellent question, and there's been a lot of discussion about that. And without getting too in the weeds, there's differences in state and federal definitions of diplomas. So federally, this is an alternative diploma. And there's lots of different pathways. Students who are identified as foster youth have an alternative diploma route that they can take with reduced graduation requirements. So there's many alternative diplomas. For SECO in particular, we did not love that language because they are earning a diploma. It's an alternative pathway. And so from what will be reported in dashboard data and in different kind of accountability reports, it will not count toward those graduation rates because of the federal definition. But as far as the provisions of the diploma, it affords the students all of the same provisions for students who are not utilizing an alternate pathway to receive a diploma, as far as competitive integrated employment and options that would be open to them once they leave our programs. So it's very nuanced, and it's a very, it's an area that a lot of people get very passionate about, because we also want to have a culture of high expectations, and we don't want to inadvertently make this something that's less than. But technically, federally, it is an alternate diploma.
Okay, thank you.
I appreciate you asking.
Yeah, that was a great question. Trustee O'Neill?
Curious, because having worked at Jefferson, the same building as their special ed department, they had a program where they were actually having the students go to Seton and run the gift shop. Is that something that's done county-wide so that there's almost a CTE component, to give them job experience prior to graduating? Is there any thought, is that county-wide program, or is it, and if not, is there a thought to go to that type of model county-wide?
So all students starting from the age of 16 who have an IEP receive transition services. Best practice is to start earlier, but as far as the requirement, it starts at age 16. I believe that there might be legislation going through right now that would reduce the age to 14. It was introduced and did not pass, but I think it's being reintroduced this year. So each LEA district and charters and county programs have the option to determine how it is that they are implementing those transition services. So as far as a unified countywide approach, no, there are some very common ways to provide transition services. And speaking specifically to the extensive support needs population, having micro enterprise businesses within programs is very common to allow them to have work experience in in an environment where they're able to practice and develop skills and then move out to work experience in a competitive integrated employment site. So there's lots of common practices, but as far as a unified county approach that this is how we do it in San Mateo County, no. But there's really amazing things going on across the county and the state to help students develop those skills.
Thank you.
I love that there was a comparative study before choosing Teach Town. So now that you do have Teach Town, what metrics are you measuring to get its effectiveness, and what input are you getting from like students, teachers, and parents?
Well, there's a lot of data collection already built into the program. And so I don't have that information, but Ellen Paulino does, and she keeps all the data. So she definitely has, she's shown greater improvement just with, not just with student outcomes, but also just educators utilizing it. And so I can't speak to the specifics of what the data shows, but just a lot of improvement in the mastery of different skills. Probably like at the intervention level, like through like the Teach Town Basics and things like that, but also the platform usage. And so it's gone up exponentially since the pilot. Also because more people are using it, like I'm gonna be fair, that, you know, like that's one of the reasons. But I also just wanted to say, like during the pilot, one of the things that came out was the teacher, and and getting that data was from teachers and paraeducators. They saw usage as the same. They were, you know, okay with both. And the tipping point was student outcomes. That was the one thing that was different. There was greater student outcomes using Teach Town.
Thank you.
I'll add one other thing. Even though we are a couple of years into our implementation journey, we still have ongoing trainings and on-site coaching. So there's lots of mechanisms for collective as well as individual support with feedback loops for our staff.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. Any other questions or comments from the board? Are there any from the public?
No comments?
Thank you. There is no action to take on this item. Thank you again. For item 8A, we have the superintendent comments. Superintendent McGee, do you have any comments to share?
I have a few comments tonight. First of all, unfortunately, our youth commissioner, Bethany Zhao, is not here tonight, but the board passed the resolution that she requested to bring to the consent agenda about Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. I do want to acknowledge Bethany. She wrote the resolution, got it to us for review, and I think it's an important topic that she raises, and I like that it came from her perspective. So congratulations to Bethany for recommending that resolution for the board. I do want to acknowledge all of our school staff. In every one of our school programs, we have so much expertise and knowledge with the population that our students work with. That goes for the Ann Campbell Center, our related services, our early start program, our special services team. You just heard about how they've been implementing Teach Town and doing this very sort of academic instructional improvement process for several years to get better outcomes for our students. And it takes real effort and passion for the work, which spans across all of our programs. Obviously, we spent a lot of time tonight on hearing about our LCAP goals and the progress we've made in the very first semester of a 3-year plan. But none of that work happens without exceptional staff that's dedicated to doing the work every day. Success is not accidental, and I would call that 6-month review of our LCAP very successful. We've definitely dug in on some important metrics. We've identified what our next steps are, and then we know that down the road over the course of the next 3 years implementing this LCAP, we have a lot more work to do. But that success takes leadership, and it takes a team approach to improving instructional structures. It takes a lot of energy to meet kids where they are every day and to show up for kids first. But then to invest also beyond your teaching day, intellectual capital on where we're going as a program. And hats off to Chris Schaus and Sarah Notch for leading the strategic plan aspect of our school programs, because that is a real anchor and aligns with all of our other goals. But in the court and community program, this time last year, at this report, we recognized that we were behind and off track on our credit recovery rates. I don't know if you remember that conversation, but the team took that feedback to heart, went back to the staff. They iterated on solutions, came up with immediate actions they could take, and nearly immediately improved the credit recovery rate. So seeing that our credit recovery rates are still strong, obviously we can always do better. But this is systems work that's underway in our programs that takes every single one of the team members to be part of. And I just want the staff to hear from me that it's not lost on me how much work is going on every single day, from the minute they show up for their kids and their families at the beginning of the day, through their instructional day, to their post day, where they're working on systems improvement. Fred Korematsu Day has become kind of a special day in San Mateo County. We observed 2 events in the last 2 weeks in partnership with the San Mateo County judges and the county attorney's office. They reenact the trial of Fred Korematsu in the courthouse. 2 weeks ago, it was with a room full of 5th graders from Jefferson Elementary School District. And this week it was a room full of high schoolers from the Jefferson Union High School District. I want to shout out Lisa Cho, our county attorney, because she really exercised her leadership from the county attorney's office to put this program together and helping lift off this unique and innovative program. Internally, we feel it was successful. And every successful event we support takes many people, many departments, cross-division collaboration. And I'd like to thank and recognize our coordinator of expanded learning and community partnerships, Ruby Makareg, for leading this effort. She's basically the conductor of a very complex symphony, lots of partners, lots of pieces to pull this off. And I would be remiss not to thank Jay Takahashi. He has a special place in my heart. For Jay, for your participation in the reenactment. You play the role of Fred Korematsu in the program. Jay approaches this performance with genuine lived experience in his family history and a deep passion for sharing that living history with young people. So it's not his job to be Fred Korematsu at SMCOE, but he's taken it on 2 years in a row and done a fantastic, amazing job. I want to finish just by talking about what has been the heaviness of the last few weeks is all about federal policies and what's coming from Washington, D.C. regarding education. I think it's time that we speak out about what's really happening in our schools. The federal policies and the various executive orders seem to imply that our schools are harming kids and that kids aren't succeeding and that they're not being getting the kinds of supports they need. That DEI has taken on a nasty negative connotation. When we go back to our strategic plan and many strategic plans across the county, it's all anchored in whole child education. We cannot look at our students as little learning bots that sit in seats and take tests and churn out test results. They are human beings. And that with them come everything about them that makes them a human being. including what their culture is, what language they speak, what neighborhood they live in, what their interests and passions are, and how they see themselves fitting into the future. You heard tonight about inclusion and belonging in this alternative diploma pathway. That is the beginning of learning for our kids. They need to step on our school campuses and know that people see them, hear them, know their names, care about their futures, regardless of what those histories are that they carry with them. And in San Mateo County, this county is doing an amazing job of serving kids in school every single day with open arms, warm hearts, highly expert educators, and caring adults who circle up around these kids to help them be successful. Our goal is to make sure that those kids get the education they need in a safe and supportive environment and go on to successful futures. There's nothing I see out of national policy that supports that. And it's taking the air out of our educators. We have to pay attention to educator wellness and make sure that they're okay showing up every day and carrying this burden of responsibility for all those little ones sitting in their classrooms. So my message today is, if you know an educator, if you know a teacher, if you know a paraeducator, if you know a school leader, please reach out to them and thank them. Bring them some flowers. This is, back to COVID days when the weight of the world is on their shoulders. And they really need to feel that we've got their back and that we know how hard their jobs are. And they are carrying and expanding on the future of this country. So I'll end with just this idea that San Mateo County is really achieving great things for our kids and families. And the narrative that's out there is completely false, that we're failing them somehow. And that concludes my comments.
Thank you. For item 9A, the board will discuss and act on the formation of an ad hoc school budget subcommittee. Superintendent McGee, back to you.
Yes, the board selected its subcommittees, I think at the last board meeting. And in the past, we have had a board budget subcommittee. Over the last several years, in order to help bring all board members along with, really strong transparency and education, we've transitioned to this idea of having a board budget study session. So there's an additional session for the board in April that is in the middle of the day on a Friday, that it's focused only on the budget and the LCAP. But given under the leadership of our Deputy Superintendent, Kevin Boltema, we have really moved our budget along as far as accounting and I think education to both the board and the public about what our budget consists of. We feel that the budget documents are accurate. It's time to dig in a little bit about some more strategic planning financially about how we move forward. And I think that we would like to have, and I think the board would also like to have, this was also a request from Trustee Bonini at the last meeting, that we stand up a board budget subcommittee in addition to the existing subcommittees that we have, in order to work together more strategically about the ways in which we can access and implement our financial resources to the best and highest use for all kids.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Is there a motion to form, any comments from the public?
No comments.
Trustee Gerard?
I have one question. Are we voting on the budget subcommittee, or are we talking about possibly combining other?
No,
or is
I
that
think,
for the
Those are two separate
legislation?
ones.
Okay, so
Yeah.
this is just for boards.
Board budget,
okay,
yeah.
thank you.
and I also didn't say that we want to keep both mechanisms in place, the board budget study session
Mhm.
and the budget subcommittee.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yes.
okay.
So is there a motion to
Oh.
form? Oh, yes, trustee O'Neill.
Hi, being the new kid on the block, I just kind of want to ask the process does the superintendent and the county office bring a budget forward? And then this board approves, amends, changes, or is it, what's the process? Because we're all elected.
Yeah.
That's the, not concern, but
Yeah.
question I
I
have.
think the short answer is the superintendent develops the budget. We bring the board along to understand the development of the budget, and then the board approves the budget.
Okay, all right, thank you. I just wanted to be sure I was,
Yeah.
clear, that's all.
Any other questions, comments? Any from the public?
No.
Thank you. Is there a motion to form an ad hoc budget subcommittee?
So move.
Is there a second?
Okay.
There is a motion to form an ad hoc budget subcommittee made by trustee Gerard and a second by trustee Benini. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion passes with a vote of 5-0, and the board has approved the formation of an ad hoc budget subcommittee. For item 9B, the board will discuss and act on the membership of the ad hoc subcommittee, budget subcommittee. Superintendent McGee?
I'll hand it back over to you two. I know in the other subcommittees, you kind of had it mapped out, but maybe you ask for people who are interested, or I'm not sure how you want to choose the members.
Yeah, I think we can open it first to see who's interested. I didn't inquire prior to the meeting.
Right.
O'Neill,
I'd be interested simply because first year it'd be learning experience,
Yeah. That'd be great. Any other members who are interested?
I am.
Thank you. Andrew Bird. Do we have someone from the three interested in being the chair?
I think trustee Benini should be the chair.
I also wanted to say that, but I'm glad you said it first. Does that sound good? Okay. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Any from the public?
No comments?
Thank you. Is there a motion regarding the membership of the ad hoc budget subcommittee?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. There is a motion to appoint Chelsea Benini to the chair of the ad hoc budget subcommittee, along with trustee O'Neill and trustee Gerard. Motion was made by trustee Gerard and a second by trustee O'Neill. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion passes with a vote of 5-0, and the board has voted to appoint trustee Benini, Gerard, and O'Neill to the ad hoc budget subcommittee. Thank you. For item 9C, the board will discuss and act on the participation of board member O'Neill in the 2025 Coast to Coast Federal Advocacy Trip in Washington, D.C. on April 28th through the 30th for 2025. Superintendent McGee?
Yes, board bylaw, something, says that when board members want to travel out of state, that it needs to come to the full board for approval. Board member O'Neill expressed to me interest in participating in this coast to coast federal advocacy trip based on my previous comments and my comments. I think federal advocacy is sorely needed, and it would be great to have a representative from San Mateo County if someone is interested to attend. So I would be in favor of Board Member O'Neill attending, but it would take an action from the board.
Are there any comments or questions from the board? Trustee O'Neill, do you want to speak?
I was just saying in my different capacities, I have visited the state, both as Vice President of the Union for Labor, also City Council, and as a school board member. So I have done lobbying previously to doing this, and this would be I will admit, a learning curve going there at the federal, but they do have a training session there for new people to learn the issues and what they're doing. And I do think, critical, having gone to that new board member orientation that we had up at the Jefferson High School district office, that with special ed being funded at 14%, I think that would be an advocacy issue we need to address and push for. Now, if that's what the CSBA as a whole wants, that's fine, but they might have something else. And I will do a full report back to the board if this is approved.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? Trustee Gerard?
Yeah, I do. I have a concern because I've been on this trip 3 times. And my concern is this. The CSBA Coast to Coast is really for district boards and district offices. There's very, very, very little attention paid to county offices of education at all. And when you go, you do go through a day of training, and you're given a list of statements and answers. And in the past, when I went, the only way that county offices of education were heard was if you added your own or interjected your own information into these questions. And that had to be done during your visits. And my concern is that the only way that you would be able to do that is if you know the needs of county offices of education. And I just feel like somebody that is only on the board for 2 months doesn't really have a whole lot of background information that's going to help. And I agree 100%. The fact that we're only financed for 14%. It was 14% when I went, I don't know how many years ago. It hasn't changed, which is really, really sad. But I feel like if you went next year, you would be much more prepared to go and be able to advocate for county offices, because everybody's advocating for districts, but very, very few people are advocating for county offices. So, that's my concern.
I have to admit, I haven't never done that before. So if you feel it's not worthwhile, I mean, I'm not offended. You know what I mean?
No,
It's.
and I don't want to
understand.
be insulting.
No, my shoulders are bigger than that, believe me.
But when I went the first time, I was like, oh my gosh. And so I had to do some real quick research work, and I knew all about the county.
Mhm.
I'd been on the county board for quite some time when I went the first time. Second time, I knew what was going to happen. But I just feel you'd be and I think you would feel better going, having had more background. You're on some great committees. You're going to learn a whole lot about budgets and a lot of other things, but you haven't visited our programs yet. You haven't seen the different things we're doing. And I don't want to be disrespectful, but I also really want you to be able to advocate for us
Mhm.
and not jump into what the districts are doing.
And, if you feel that way, I'm okay with that either. I mean, because I would be using vacation time and everything else. So,
Okay.
you know what I mean? It's not like I'm going on
Yeah,
a
I
trip or
think
whatever.
next year would
Yeah,
be great.
So if that's fine, I'm not offended,
Okay.
but
I
not
don't
at
mean to
all.
be, but I want you to feel good about what you're doing when you're back there.
Yeah,
And if you're a county board member, I really want you advocating for the county because we need people advocating for the county. But you really have to have a good background in what we're doing and understanding what our needs are.
then if that would make you feel better, I'll withdraw the request. Okay, so amend the agenda to remove the request.
Okay,
That's fine.
Can we do
I'm
that
not-
now?
I mean,
Yeah.
Or-
I think you can just take a motion not to approve.
Any other comments before we move to a motion? Mhm.
I just, I don't.
Trustee Benini?
I just wanted to say there are, you probably well know, trustee O'Neill, there are other opportunities too to sort of get your feet wet on these now education issues. There's a legislative action day that CSBA does with our state legislators. We're doing one with our county boards association. So those are also really great opportunities to see how CSBA does this, but I agree with trustee Gerard that they are very district focused, and that's exactly why we have this new association.
In previous positions, I've done all of those. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
Yeah.
So you've seen it.
So, yeah, no, and I understand, what you're saying. I'm not offended. It's the way it is. That's
Yeah,
fine.
I mean, for me, I feel like it is also an opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
to connect, and there are other benefits from
Right,
it. But
right.
I have to agree. I mean, I have not gone on the coast to coast, and I don't know. Well, I'm sure sometimes county board members go, but Bev's gone in the past. But
I
Um,
have, but
is there like a
not,
contingent? I don't know. I'm just-
not necessarily from San Mateo County. Other board members go, mostly county board members that are on the ledge committee for CSBA.
Oh, right. Yeah, CSBA is very directive in their what you're advocating for.
Yeah,
That's my
you'd be
experience.
surprised how strict it is, so.
That's fine.
Board President
you.
Torres, may I just make a quick comment?
Yes.
If there were ever a year to go advocate federally, it's this year. The president is going to release an executive order to dismantle the Department of Education. You want to talk about 14% through IDEA, that's a national issue. That's not a county or a district issue. So I'm just asking, it's fine, whatever the board decides, but do it through the lens of understanding where we are in history.
But when the
Thank you.
Board of Ed, if he gets rid of the Department of Ed, that's also free school lunches, I believe. It's also.
It's Title I, it's,
School-
yeah,
school
it will
lunches,
dismantle the department and
student
move them all
loans.
over to
Yes,
other departments. So
Right. So
that
it's
is a
critical time.
national message that will be coming out within the next week or two.
Great, thank you. For my comments, I also agree with Trustee Gerard and Trustee Benini that I think it is a great opportunity. I do think it's a little too soon, just as you're trying to distinguish between. I did read. I looked up the conference and read more about it, and yeah, it did seem much more geared towards school districts. And I know in our conversations, it's been about like distinguishing their role versus our role. And so I do agree that I think next year would be a better time to do this. And I understand like the need now with the current leadership and administration, but I feel that there will be other ways to support us through our partner organizations like ACCBE and CSBA and other forms that are more specific to whatever the outcomes are from the national level. Any other comments or questions?
I'll make the motion I make the motion to say no to the.
Before Trustee Love has a comment, I
Oh.
believe.
No, I think it's probably appropriate to withdraw like you planned on doing it and not have a vote on it because you were willing to do that.
Okay.
We don't have an attorney here. I don't know if somebody else wants to comment on that, but.
See, the issue would be that you're amending the agenda, and according to the Brown Act, we've already approved the agenda as is. So I think you need a motion to clear the deck and do it. So I'll make the motion to decline the trip to Washington DC, and we can vote on it.
Okay. Well, first I need to ask if there's a motion, and then we'll do the second. Is there a motion regarding the participation of Board Member O'Neill in the 2025 Coast to Coast Federal Advocacy Trip in Washington, DC? And then you would say motion.
So moved.
Second.
Do we need?
We need a
public comment?
specific motion because it just said regarding the participation. So we need a specific motion.
Oh,
I think we need public comment because it's a motion and action item.
so what did we say? No? What do we, I'm confused.
Board Member O'Neill made a motion before you went and said, we need to make a motion. So I think Board Member O'Neill, just repeat your motion, please.
I move that we decline the item 9A discussion of the Coast to Coast Federal Advocacy Trip in Washington, DC.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second. There is a motion to decline item 9A for the Washington, DC Coast to Coast Federal Advocacy Trip. Made by Trustee O'Neill and a second by Trustee Gerard. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The motion passes with a vote of 5-0, and the board has approved to decline item 9A of the 2025 Coast to Coast Federal Advocacy Trip. For item 9D, when an ad hoc subcommittee meets or a representative attends a meeting related to their given assignment, board members may choose to bring a report to the board at this time. Would any board members like to report out? Trustee Love?
I don't have something to report out. I just had an inquiry on getting the subcommittee started. Is that something the board members should work on the superintendent? Did you have a preferred way you would like to get them? I'm on some committees. I haven't heard anything. I'm leading some committees and I haven't done anything. So I was just your guidance on that.
We do have it on the schedule to reach out and schedule. So it will be happening soon.
Thank you.
All right,
Yes.
thanks.
Trustee O'Neill?
Just say as we did, I did have a meeting with Superintendent McGee to start the school funding one. We're just still ironing stuff out, okay? And then I did for the housing subcommittee, if you wish, the housing board for the Jefferson High School District's housing project, their board meeting is tomorrow night. If you want to go to it just to see how it works and do that, I can send you an agenda for it.
Okay, will you do
Okay.
that?
Yeah.
Okay, are you gonna be there too?
Yeah, I'm on the board.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Are there any comments or questions from the board? Are there any from the public?
No comments.
There is no action to take on this item. For item 9E, board members will comment. Trustee Love?
Thank you. I just had a couple comments. Really appreciated the LCAP presentation. I thought it was really well done and the metrics and the transparency, just really enjoyed that. I attended the ACCBE meeting for new trustees on Monday. It was really well done. There were a lot of people there to support new trustees, and it just was the beginning of a conversation. There were a lot of questions, and the group said, we'll get to these things as we go forward. So that was great. I have been meeting with trustees from the school districts in my trustee area. One of the things that I found interesting is that when I talked to them about their key priorities, there's no consistency across the board. The only thing maybe is an interest to look internally, but I'll continue to have those meetings, but it has been interesting and useful. And then I also, just following up on our governance meeting, there's a lot, as Superintendent McGee mentioned, that's going on that's impacting children and families. And I just wonder if We can work to kind of figure out what's the role that we're going to play united to sort of support families. The statement was great. And if there's a role that we can play to support the county office superintendent, I'd like to figure that out and do something. From that work we did on governance, there was a key line about like, are we a collection of individuals kind of pursuing our own pet projects? Or are we a unified group that here's what we're working on and here's what we're doing, and we're all kind of pulling some part of that together. So I'd like to see that if we could. And so I turn that over to you, Board President, to work maybe with Superintendent McGee to help us figure out if that's a direction to go in. Thank you.
Definitely. I love that idea. Thank you. Trustee O'Neill?
Yes, I did send, I was invited to be one of the volunteer evaluators for Oceana High School. And I wanted to encourage the board to go there. One is they do kind of have a hard time getting volunteers, but anybody that has done it has been very impressed about the youth in Oceana, because the way the program works is when in their freshman year, they pick a project and they have to work on that for 4 years. And then to graduate, they have to give the presentation before an audience after working on it 4 years. And it's quite varied, in terms of, what each kid chooses. But it's a very good project. Plus, Stephanie will be doing that. We might even get to evaluate her. I also sent to Superintendent McGee for distribution a flyer for the art contest. I think it's from grades 6 through 12 for the annual crop report in San Mateo County. They do an annual report and they have the kids do an art contest with cash prizes for the different sections, whatever. It's a $99 million industry here in San Mateo County. And it's done. So I sent that to Superintendent McGee to distribute to the different things. Another one we might be looking at is the Board of Supervisors have Measure K, which is a tax that was passed by the voters to support different services in San Mateo County. And it collects roughly $150 million a year. And they are looking at revising the current methods of how they allocate that money. So a lot of it does support community groups, youth activities, etc. We should just be aware of it. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Bonini?
Let's see. I just wanted to share that I really enjoyed attending the Uplifting Youth Voice event that was at Alcove last Saturday. Mary McGrath was there leading. She had coordinated with or worked together. It's regarding the larger project, right? The United for Youth Blueprint for 2030. And it was student-led and it was amazing. It was the the Youth Action Board for the Behavioral Health Commission, BHRS, and then of course our office here. And it was really, really great. It was really a lot of just listening to the students and hearing what their needs are around different mental health related issues, one being social media, truancy, other things like that. So I really enjoyed it, and it was great to see some of the San Mateo County office staff there. So that's all.
Thank you. Vice President Gerard?
Thank you very much. I really appreciated both of the presentations, and especially the ALCAP one, because there was a lot of really good information about our court and community schools. And that's really, it's encouraging to see the progress that's being made. And I really appreciated that. I want to let you know that I did volunteer for Oceana.
Good.
So we'll see if they're going to take me or not.
Good shot.
Right. Do they let you know you don't just show up at a training, right? They'll let you know.
No, I'm sure they're going to send you a new.
Okay.
I know, I'm sure they'll send you an email that
Okay.
it's going to do there, but I did want to interrupt you one thing. I wanted to apologize for being late. I checked for traffic. It said 27 minutes to get here. I allowed an hour and I was still late.
It's happened to all of us.
You know,
It's
so
happened to all of us.
I just
Don't
felt
worry.
bad because, you know,
Really?
your third meeting and you're showing up late.
Okay.
The point is you made.
We'll forgive you. Okay, we don't set you in the corner with a dunce hat or anything. Also, I just also want to mention that, ACCBE has been very, very busy. And as I mentioned at our, governance workshop last week, on the 27th, we had our first, legislative, webinar. And it was very well attended. We had 60 people sign up, and we didn't have as many attend, but I think it was due to the time that we scheduled it. So we're going to look at scheduling at a different time next time. And as Trustee Love said, we had our new board member governance workshop on Monday night. And we were very pleased with the attendance. And we had 15 new board members attend. And I thought it went well. I was one of the presenters, so I could be a little prejudiced. But it was really, really fun to be able to meet a lot of the new board members throughout the state. And we had people from everywhere throughout the state. We had large, we had small, we had medium, north, south, east, west, everybody. So that was also very, very nice. And as I said, I did volunteer to be an evaluator for the seniors at Oceana. And I'm hoping I'm chosen. I'm looking forward to that. And because I've never done that before and have a lot of history with Oceana, with all three of my children graduating from there and a granddaughter. So I'm very happy to do that. So thank you.
And thank you. I started off my morning amazingly at the Fred Korematsu event at the Hall of Justice. I was allowed to do an opening statement for everyone, so it was great to see the youth and our high schoolers there. Unfortunately, I was not able to stay for the whole event. I just stayed until the reenactment of the trial, and shout out to Ruby and Jay for their work behind the scenes and then for making it happen and participating in that. They were great. And that's all I have from my end. Item 10 is the adjournment. So the next regular meeting will take place on Wednesday, February 19th, 2025 at 7 p.m. This meeting is now adjourned.